In this lesson, we'll be going over SOQL for loops. They are the same syntax as the collection for loop. However, the SOQL statement is used instead of a list. There are two ways that you can perform this loop. The first one is when we'll use the select statement instead of the list. So we'll be using an account as well for this. So we'll do for account ACCT and then select ID name from account. We'll just limit 10. And then I can debug. And then run this. As I run it, I can see that we just debug 10 account records. And that's one way to use the SOQL for loop instead of a list, and you can just use the SOQL statement instead of a list. The other way that you can do it is by using the database query. So same way with the account ACCT, and we'll do database query, which we have learned before. So then it's a string select ID name from account limit 10. And then I can do the same thing where I debug the account. And when I run that, I get the same thing. So this would be, instead of using a list, we can do the query directly within the for loop. So you may be asking yourself, why would we do that? There's one key advantage to using either of these queries, either using the select or the database query. And this way has really one advantage, and that's when we use very large lists or very large records of lists, to be more precise. When developing in Salesforce, there's a lot of limits that we have to adhere to. One of those limits is heap size, which is the amount of memory that can be used in a transaction. And for synchronous transactions, it's 6 megabytes. For asynchronous transactions, it's 12 megabytes. And we'll be going over asynchronous later on, which means that the majority of time when we're running code, we need to make sure that we don't use more than 6 megabytes of memory, because most of what we run is going to be synchronous transactions and not going to be asynchronous transactions. And the big culprit for hitting that heap size limit is generally S-object lists. So we haven't talked about limits yet. However, I figured that this was going to be a good time to go over that, because we're learning right now about SOQL for loops, and this kind of explains one of the reasons why you would want to use one. So first, what we need to do to show the limit or the difference in the limit and the size is I want to create 5,000 accounts. One way to do this would be to use a loop. So first, what I want to do is I want a list of accounts, and we'll call it account list, and we're just going to create a new list. We're not going to put anything in it for right now. And then I want a for loop, and we'll be using the traditional for loop. So I equals 0, and then we want 5,000, so I is less than 5,000, and then I plus plus. So then what I want to do is I want to create a new account, and I want to add that to the account list. So I do the account list, add new account, and then we'll just name it, and we'll call it heap account. And we're going to be creating 5,000 of these. The whole purpose of this is to demonstrate the difference in the size of the lists, or size of the heap. and then we're going to run this. So we're inserting that list after we build 5,000 accounts in it. So I run this. This is going to take a little while. So then we can start setting up the tests for it. First, what we'll do is we'll test the, we'll do the select first to see the heap size for the select. So if I do another for loop, it'll be the account. And then we'll just call this test, or actually I'll use the same, what we've been doing beforehand, so account. And then we'll do a select, ID, name from account. And then this time we'll do where name equals heap account. So we're going to get those 5,000 records. Oh, and then actually what I want to do first is I want to have an integer I, and we'll equal it to 0. So what I want to do within the for loop is I want to show you what the heap size is within the for loop, and then what the heap size is afterwards. And to demonstrate the difference, I want to get the heap size in the for loop, but since we're going to be executing the block of code 5,000 times, I don't want it to iterate through and keep giving you the heap size for each record. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to get the first one. So I'll just do I plus plus, and this is going to increment I each time that block is ran. And then I'll just do a quick if for if I equals 0. So the first one we will debug. So system.debug. And within the debug, I'll do a string for heap size after query. And then add, so there is a class called limits. And then in there, there's a method for getting the heap size. It's called getHeapSize. And then, so that's going to get us the heap size within the block. And then I want the heap size out after the for loop has ran. So then I will just grab this limits.heapSize and run this. So this is done creating all the accounts, and I can see right here we created 5,000 records. Now if I run this, okay, I can see, oh shoot. Okay, I want this to equal 1 and not 0 because I'm incrementing it first and then doing the if statement. There. So now I see heap size after the query, 11,600 some. And then, so that's in the code, the block of code when it's running and it got the list. And then afterwards, when I debug, I have the heap size of 1,000 roughly. And that's because the query goes away and the heap is gone. It's not in there because it's not being stored in a list. And so again, heap has to do with memory, and because we're not storing this query anywhere, it goes away. Now, let's say I'm going to copy this, and instead of doing the query within here, I'm going to have a list of accounts where we're going to do the query outside. So we're going to do account list, and then I'm just going to take this select paste it here, and then reference the account list. And then run the same set. Okay, now we can see that the heap size is much larger. We have 261,000 and then pretty much the exact same heap size afterwards. The reason why is because we have this list and this list is staying there. It's not going away after the for loop. And the other reason why, if we saw, so this was 200,000, this heap is only 11,000. The reason for that is because even though both of them are looping through and getting 5,000 records, this is storing 5,000 records. It's getting all of them at once. If you do a for loop within if you do a SOQL statement within the for loop, it's only going to get 200 records at a time. So Salesforce is going to be handling that, where it grabs 200 and then runs the block of code, grabs the next 200 and runs. And that way you're not using a whole bunch of memory all at once. So the same thing happens when we do the database query. So inside here, so I copied the select. I want to get the database.query. Turn that into a string. Okay, and then because I want to escape these two strings right in here, and then run it again. So this is 261,000, and I'm getting an error. Okay, and I have an error. Oh, it's missing another parentheses. Okay, let's run this. Okay, and we can see here the query is the same amount. So we have the heap size with 11,000 instead of 261,000, and then after the query, the heap size goes away. So that's one of the main reasons, or probably the main reason for using a select statement within your for loops. So if you see that, otherwise the other reason would just be whether or not you want to use a list. So that's how you can reduce the heap size. So the other thing that I wanted to do before we end this lesson is I want to delete all those accounts. So I want to get select ID from account where name is equal to heap count. Otherwise, if we don't do this, you're going to have storage limits hit if you need to create any accounts within your org. At least if it's a developer org or a Trailhead playground. And that deleted all those.